Hey! So, new episode. Here I'm in the messy closet. Now, I'll try to describe what that actually is here. Maybe I'll show you around a little bit. So, most of us are building trucks. We build our trucks usually in places where there's other people. Sometimes we do it in our living rooms or kitchen table or something like that. But you're not going to do the paint work there. You're not going to do the welding and the messy stuff. And if you are, I'm not sure you should be doing that. So what I did is most of the trucks that I build, I end up building not in the shop space, but actually in the office space. And in the office space, Steven's got all of the packaging there, and I've got my design station and all that other stuff. The studio's in the office space. And so I do some of my messy work there, but I don't do all the grinding and all the cutting and the welding and that kind of stuff. So what I did is I converted this old closet that was here. I'll just try to show you kind of what I'm talking about. So I've got one flat wall there, and then I put in I had this little end corner here in this closet, so I put in this little tiny combo mill that I had kicking around, which actually is perfect for turning links and little things like that. I've got this combo saw here, which I'm actually will never use because it's actually way too small to use for, you know, machine shop style cutting, but it works great for doing tiny things. So I actually put a fine tip blade on it. I think it's a 64. Where's my other blade? I could tell you what it is. I don't know what the teeth is, but it's a super fine teeth blade. This is a super cheap saw, okay? Like, this thing, not only is it cheap to buy, but it's actually like a cheap, not very nice saw. So it's actually perfect for doing little things like cutting tube and stuff. So basically, instead of using this as a chop saw, like usually this saw would just come down and cut something in the vise here, but I need an actual like stand-up saw. So what I did is I screwed on a little piece of aluminum here instead of the little guard that was there, and then I chopped a piece of countertop, and I used that for kind of a standoff thing to just keep the tube from rubbing on the aluminum plate. And then I cut my tube there and stuff, and it works great. I use it for cutting mounting brackets. This is a leftover fab tab from scalarfab.com. They sell tons of this fantastic, nice, good size metal for doing RC parts. This was an old Fairlead plate there that I had from them, and I just stuck it in the saw here and ripped off a piece, and then I used it for mounts, which I'll show you later on. And in this messy closet, I've got a couple of grinders that I can use just for doing truck builds. Some of my favorite things is this nylon wheel. The nylon wheel will polish anything, and it doesn't take material off, so that's important. Basic grinder wheel. Of course, this is the wire brush, which is really good for cleaning up welds and stuff like that. And then I did something other funny thing there, because as we use the tools that we have, we kind of find ways that we like them the best, you know. It turns out that I like my Dremel sander the best when it's actually screwed onto the wall. So that seems funny, but it's stationary, and it just seems to be the most handy for me when it's screwed on the wall. So there it is. I want to talk about the tube work welding that I'm doing right now. The tube work, there's a couple ways you can do this, okay? So I use the electric. Of course, I use the MIG welding, which is, the MIG welder is down there, in there. There's the tank, and it's actually underneath the table here. And then I have this steel table here that I use for clamping on and using for welding and messy, dirty stuff. It also gives me a place to put my magnets, and I use magnets to hold stuff when I'm welding on it. A little bit of torch dirt here. I use MAP gas sometimes, but the problem that I actually have with the MAP gas is that it comes out so big, you're in danger of unheating other soldered joints or other brazed joints. So my favorite thing to use is actually this tiny little torch set. I don't know if you guys have these where you are or have them available, but this is a tiny little oxygen and MAP or oxygen and propane torch set. look at the size of the tip on this. I don't know if I can get this to macro here, but look at the size of the tip on that. This thing, I can get a flame with this thing that's about 3 millimeters, easily 3 millimeters long, and maybe only 2 millimeters across. Like, I mean, this is a tiny, tiny, tiny flame, and it's stupid hot, which is so great, because when I'm actually doing my proper welding, you know, I can just put the torch like right on it, and just I can get the heat just in the joint that I want to use. It's fantastic. So again, this is a Worthington set, I think, that I first started off with, and this is a MAP propane mix and oxygen, and then you need a tiny, tiny little flame, like tiny. So another one of my favorite tools is this one right here. This is a cordless Dremel, and it's actually got a sanding wheel on it. This doesn't have enough horsepower to actually do, you know, big metal cutting and stuff like that, but it has quite a bit of RPM, and the sanding discs make really short work of stuff like trimming out plastic corners on your body and stuff like that. So it's just, I think it's a great tool. And I also have a regular Dremel here that I've put on a flexible line, and that means you can just turn it on here. It's hanging from the bench. You can just turn it on and then, you know, chop your stuff, whatever you gotta do. So that's what's going on with the messy closet. I now can't see you, so as soon as I get out of this, like, I've got a couple of big lights here, and as soon as I get out of these lights, then that's it. I'm gonna go back to the messy bench in the office. So I show you all that because there's a bunch of new stuff I've done on the truck here. Most of it has to do with the tube work. As I was saying in the last video, I'm going to start to get this mounted onto the chassis, and I really wanted to talk about just how that happened and show you the tools that I was using to make that happen. So let me get this thing just situated here so I can talk about that. Let me see. There, that's pretty good. So the body's on now. The body is not on the way that it used to be. I made a bunch of changes with that, and I'll explain why I made the changes. First of all, the body now comes off and on demand. That's a big deal to me, because I want to make sure that I can check fit stuff, do soldering, welding, whatever it is, and still be able to just drop this on in some way, shape, and form that's really quick and easy. You know, right now, because there's so much tube work happening, it's actually slightly more fiddly to get it on, but it's still pretty quick. Even, of course, quicker to get it off. Now, let me show you inside why I did some of these things. I have started to mount the tube onto the chassis now. Let me just clip this in here. There we go. Can't wait till this is all built up. It's really cool. So, first off, I've got the wheels here just sitting with no wheel nuts on it for the sake of you to see it together, but I'm having to do welding on, brazing on here on a regular basis now, so I've actually got the wheel nuts off of this. The wheelbase I'm not worried about. It's not going to change anymore. The tube work is actually attached to the chassis now, so I really don't have to worry about that either, and I don't really need the wheels on it per se. Now, I had to change a bunch of stuff. I was talking about the tube work and stuff is kind of an imperfect science, if you will. It's more art than science. One of the things I discovered is when I started welding these cross members in here, I've got these in. I brazed these on now because in our last video we were talking about the mismatch between this one and this one. And so I've got that on now. What I did is, I heated this up here with my little micro torch, jammed a bunch of brass on it, and then boom, there it is, right? So it's pretty clean, pretty simple, worked fantastic. You can see both of them in line there now. They're in line with the chassis. They're in line with each other. It's pretty good for imperfect tube. It's pretty good. But what I realized there is that as soon as I started heating up this tube here, the tube actually, because of the pressure on it from the other bends, the tube actually warped a little bit. It kind of turned into a very, very slight banana, not much. But I did have to kind of put this in the vise again and re-tighten it, how do you say, straighten it out almost, So get rid of the banana, so that was a little odd. The front, of course, is now located really nicely up and down, left and right, because I've got these two cross members in that we talked about in the last video. But then, I needed some way to hold the back of the truck together. So, again, because this is sort of work in progress, one step at a time, I do a whole bunch of stuff on my builds that are just setup parts. This has absolutely nothing to do with the way it's going to look when I'm done. But what I wanted to do was somehow hold the tube in the back in this inline and in this upright position up and down and in the frame this way, and I had to somehow attach it to the chassis in some way, shape, and form. So what I ended up doing was putting two cross members together. I just stacked them, and then I got a little shelf L bracket and drilled a hole in it and stuck that little screw in it there so I could attach it to the cross member. And then I vice gripped it onto the tube. Well, this was still clamped down in the right position. And then I put a little tiny bit of brass. I just welded a little tiny bit of brass onto it here. Brazed it on there, boom. So this is still a temporary part. I can very easily heat that with the torch, drop that bracket right off after the other tube work is on, and it'll be great. So I'm well on my way, and this is going to disappear when it's done anyway, so that's exciting. Now, I needed a way to hold the body from dropping down. So what I actually did was I took a regular round washer. I cut the washer in half on my little bandsaw that I was showing you. That's why I want to show you the tools. And then I cut the washer in half. I laid the washer flat underneath the tube right here. And then I knocked it in with a couple of little pieces of brass, and then so boom, that's soldered on there, it's raised on there. And the body now will sit just inside the tube right on top of that washer. That seems like so simple, but it matters to me because when I'm doing the cage work up top, I want to make sure that the plastic work isn't sitting funny, you know what I mean? So this really just goes in like this, and if I can manage to do this, there, that's where it sits now. So the plastic is sitting on that little washer in there. See that? It sits, oh, this side isn't down yet. There we go. See, that's why I need the washer. So now it's sitting flat. It's sitting level with itself. It's level on the frame. And I know exactly where it is, and all my temporary metal work will be gone when I'm done my double tube bumper in the back with the all the other stuff, light brackets and stuff. Now I learned something else about this imperfect tubing. When I was bending this up here, it turns out that this side here was nice on the body. This side was nice on the body, and I really like the curve on the back on this side. This curve was really nice. That was all one piece. But just for this video, I had to cut out 2 millimeters of tube right here because this section was too long. So what it meant was that the bumper part here was actually sticking out farther away from the shell than this side was. So I actually had to cut 2 millimeters of tube out here, and then I put a little set screw in there to hold it in line, and I jammed a little bit of brass on it. So it's a very simple fix. But now I've got the appropriate gap right there, which is what I was looking for. So you learn a lot from doing this stuff. Now, why on earth do I have these two bars here going across? Okay. First of all, if you see the driveline angle, you'll realize real quick that this driveline right here is going to be, the tube is right in the way. I mean, it's right in the way of the drive shaft. So who does that, right? Like, nobody puts a bunch of tube work right in the way of their drive shaft. Well, I do, and I'll tell you why. Because I'm going to do more welding on this, soldering and brazing and all this other stuff, I'll use electric, I'll use copper or brass, sorry, I'll use probably solder if it's fine tube. and it doesn't have like maybe little grab handles. I'll probably use silver solder on there instead of more heat and the brass. But I realized from this arch problem, where I heated this up and then this sort of bent into a banana, I don't want the whole tube work starting to get out of shape when it gets warm, okay? And my ability to get a really fine spot of heat is great, okay? It's great. I only need a tiny amount of gas and and it's hot and that's great. But I don't want this all warping. So I put in these two long cross members here, and they go all the way across. They keep the sides of the truck in line, so I don't end up with one of them flexing out funny or whatever. And then I will use these for my floor mounts. You can kind of see where I'm going with this, right? Because I'm going to put a metal wrap underneath here to act as a skid plates on the side floors. And then I'm going to keep it going up here and into the wheel well. So this is going to be a very, very thin piece of steel here, very thin piece that wraps all the way around. And then I will cut out the tunnel sections and put an actual drivetrain hoop here. So, but for now it's attached. And in the rear of this crossmember tube right here, I used my little saw and my grinder to round out the bottom of this little piece of metal, and you can see it here on the other side too. I drilled a hole in it, I attached it with a nut first, and I lined up the tube, and then because there's no plastic really in the way here for me to bother with the heat, I can just put the torch on it right there, and then just a little bit of heat, a little bit of brass, and then boom, I'm done. So I've actually got the tube work attached at the back to keep that in line. I've got this cross-member tube attached to the frame rail here, so I know that this is never going to move. This one is attached between so it can't warp. That's the only purpose. And then I've got these two crossers up here right behind the front wheel, so the tube has a lot of attachment points, and I'm really happy about that. That's great. At some point I will chop off the back of the frame, probably soon, and then start my double tube bumper and a few other things. But this whole thing actually can come off right now with these two screws, these two inside frame screws, the one here at the back, and then I can take the entire tube off if I want. Right now I don't want to do that. I want to make sure I can keep it square, so I'm going to leave it like this. But anyway, that's the update with the tube work. I'm having a pile of fun with it actually. I'm glad that I went through the effort to talk about the frame and change the frame earlier on, because of course now I'm starting to think about the tube in the front for the winch. I'm pretty sure I'm going to put the winch down into the chassis a little bit like that. So I think that look is pretty legit actually. It's nice and low. I don't like the winches up too high because it just pulls the body down too much. So I'm thinking about how to do the front tube now. And of course, now that we've got these two cross members here in underneath, you'll notice that they just happen to line up perfectly with these two body holes. You see that? They just happen to line up perfectly with those body holes. Haha, that was a bit of a joke. So, I mean, I did that on purpose, right? Because if I decide I want to use these for body mounts, which I don't think I do, but if I do, I have tube work already there, and I can just put a little tiny tab on there with a screw hole in it and actually screw the body in. Like, it's that easy. But now, the really fun part is coming for me, the really fun part, because I've got these two tubes here now that go across, and I can actually use those for the base to start the windshield tubing. I can use this one to start the safety cage for behind the seat, and I'm going to actually get started on the tube work on top now, and that to me is very exciting. So, thanks for watching. Hope talking about the tools and stuff kind of helps you guys out. Sorry about how messy my bench is and my messy closet, but I think it's important to have a space to do your work. And so some guys use your outside shed or your garage or whatever, and that's all great, and I think that's really important actually, that you have a space you can do that in. It's of course really important for me that I don't end up with welding and grinding dust and everything else out here in the office, because you know this is all clean space. Like we don't want to have I don't know, grinding bits in parts that we package? No. So I hope that helps you guys out. This is where I'm at with the comp toy, and I'm really excited to see this thing continue to develop, and so thanks for watching. If you think this might help somebody else out in your local groups or whatever, then share the video around, that'd be great. And hopefully we can make tiny trucking better for everybody. Bye-bye.